What's up, everybody? We are live on One True Sport and the Snake Pit YouTube, and I am joined by Lance Archer for another Murderhawk Mailbag is the name that we decided to go with here. And brother, I cannot thank you enough for being here with me.
Very cool, man. I appreciate it.
Dude, I'm so psyched. And this is my first time going live on our new platform, which is One True Sport. Guys, if you haven't signed up for that membership tier yet, by all means, go to onetruesporttv.com. It's right here on the YouTube page, and you can sort it out. There's different tiers for everybody. So please go and have a look at that. And I also want to remind you guys that we do have super chat option available for this live stream. And if you want to guarantee that your question gets answered, all you have to do is make a donation of any kind. It doesn't have to be like 20 or 30 bucks or whatever. Throw us a buck and we will get your question in here. We'll get as many as we possibly can over the duration of this thing. We'll have a good time. But before we get into everything, I also do want to say, many of my listeners know that I've entered the world of pro wrestling with International Wrestling Cartel here in Pittsburgh, and I've been receiving the best training available from the top independent wrestling promotion on the East Coast. They've got a big show coming up this Saturday, June 22nd, and I'll be there. It's Plumber Slam, and it's at Mark's Court Time in Elizabeth, PA. It all starts at 7 p.m. Get the details from IWC Wrestling on social media. And if you can't be there live, why don't you check it out on Triller TV or over at iwcwrestling.com. All right, with that, Lance, let's go ahead and get into these questions. Let's see. Let me go ahead and check the chat and see what we've got here. All right, we've got Eddie Prather. He thinks I'm my brother Dom. It's me, Marcus, Eddie. And we've got more. Thank you guys for joining us. We did get a couple member questions, which we'll get into here first.
All right.
Liam Evans says, have you been following TNA lately? I've really enjoyed what they've been doing there. And would you consider another run there if you weren't with AEW?
I mean, the one thing I've always said about the business is you never say never. But right now with AEW, everything's going good and strong. You know, I think everybody kind of keeps up with everything that's going on in the business. And I have friends that are there, old tag partners. Brian Myers and I had a little bit of a history way back in the day with the WWE when we were the unofficial gate crashers. You know, and then I've got good friends that I've known since my first run in TNA, like Frankie Kazarian, who, you know, he and I were there way back in the early 2000s for all those years. So, you know, I like to watch my friends, see their success, see what they're doing. I think it's good for the business when companies are kind of doing their best to try to be competitive with other companies. And as you see in the world of professional wrestling, there's a lot of forbidden doors being opened lately. So it's a cool time to see wrestling as a whole. As far as me and TNA, you know, who knows what happens in the future, but right now I'm running strong with AEW and have no plans to leave.
Man, that's great. Locked in with AEW, and why shouldn't you be one of the top promotions here in the United States or the world for that matter? Yambag Jones just jumped in and said, hey, and I've actually got a question from Yammer, Greg the Yammer Valentine there. He says, Lance, does ribbing exist anymore, or was that just a product of an older generation?
Does what exist anymore?
Ribbing.
I think it does. I think it's obviously it's probably calmed down a lot in comparison to what it was. You know, you hear the stories of some of the shenanigans that happened back in the day. I think, you know, with just the way the world has become, the constant threat of social media at every waking second of life. A lot of the ribs from back in the day are just things that could never happen today without like immediate consequences. But I think if you've got friends, you're obviously giving them grief as much as you can. You know who can take what, and you kind of rib them accordingly. You know, I mean, I've done stuff like if I've got friends that are champions and they put their belt on, like right before they're going out the curtain or whatever, you know, I'll try to unsnap it so it falls off of them. You know, just simple little things like that. And that's nothing. That's so easy, but that's just between friends, you know. But I like I said, I don't think some of the horror stories you hear about some of the ribs that happened in the past really ever happen anymore, because like I said, the immediate consequences of those things are just, you know, beyond detrimental to somebody's career these days.
Yes, I think that the world has changed for the better in that way. You know, you hear about people getting H-bombed and then having an eyebrow shaved off. Lance, what would the
See, that's not so bad. That's kind of funny, you know. And some people put themselves in positions and they H-bomb themselves with whatever they choose to partake in. And personally, I think if you get that messed up, especially if it's your own choice, sometimes you deserve an eyebrow being shaved off.
That's a unique perspective. Not what I was expecting. What would the receipt be though if you had an eyebrow shaved off by somebody?
Uh, it would depend on who it was, and I would definitely try to come up with something extremely creative in that moment. I think I'm one of the people that, like, especially if it was a friend of mine, and I put myself in the position for that to be allowed to happen. I would laugh about it because I would think it's hilarious that they were brave enough to do so. Because there's a lot worse things that could happen than losing an eyebrow that's going to grow back. Um, but yeah, if a friend did it to me, oh man, I'm bringing the thunder with my return.
Eddie Prather hit the super chat. And a reminder, anybody can hit the super chat if you're just getting in here. If you do hit the super chat, it's a guarantee we'll get to your question. Eddie asked, Lance, any good Jimmy Rave stories?
You know, Jimmy and I, we were cool with wrestling. I think the team worked. It was fun, especially kind of once we just said screw it and donned, you know, the crazy, you know, me with the slash look and him with the kind of glam rock look and whatnot. But, you know, he and I, you know, we shared rooms a few times because back in the early TNA days, you know, there wasn't a lot of money coming our way. So we used to split rooms as much as we could and things like that. But there was never, you know, anything specific, no real good stories. He was always a good dude. You know, we did a lot of house shows and stuff like that together, and then we'd pack 6 or 7 guys in a minivan, and you know, so it wasn't, you know, other than stupid stories in a smelly minivan, you know, you didn't have many like cool things, I guess, because I just wasn't one of his best buddies. I didn't like hang out with him beyond the wrestling capacity. So, you know, I don't have any good or bad stories about him. I just know that he was always to me a good dude. You know, before a lot of his demons took over. And, you know, he's an amazing wrestler, you know, one of the smoothest in the ring that I ever saw. You know, the team, it worked, you know, and it was unfortunate that TNA never capitalized on it the way they should have.
Man, the Rock and Rave infection, it was a cool name. And if I remember right, last episode, you said it was you that came up with the name?
Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, there was a lot of collaboration for it, but it was me that more or less came up with the Rock and Rave infection. You know, the rock and roll connection and things like that. And I was like, oh, let's do the Rock and Rave infection. You know, and you know, the Rock thing kind of bit me in the ass because then they changed my name to Lance Rock at one point. Which the funny thing is there was like a kids show where the character name was Lance Rock. So like if people looked it up, they were either seeing me or they were seeing this like kids show guy.
The opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes, very much. If you look up Lance Rock, you'll see how far of an opposite ends of the spectrum that was.
All right, that'll be the next one. We're gonna have a slide with side-by-side photos of you guys.
Right.
One True Sport member, Allison Faye, asks if you could use any song for your entrance song, what would it be?
The one I'm using right now, Everybody Dies.
All right, you wouldn't change. Like if you could pick any song from any era, any musician.
Oh man, that's you know, with the current character, the Murderhawk Monster. There's old. Was it Disturbed? Bodies hit the floor, or was that?
Oh, I think it was Disturbed. Well, or Drowning Pool.
Drowning Pool. Yes, Drowning Pool's Bodies Hit the Floor, and that was always a good one. Or you know, I mean, a lot of times on the independent scene, before you know, I got the song that I use now, Everybody Dies. I would always use Korn's Blind because I loved the intro. Just it was a long intro, but man, when it's "Are you ready?" you know, and everybody started coming out, it was a pretty cool moment, you know, and it got you hyped because especially if you got to use the whole long entrance.
Absolutely, those are both great options and great question from Allison. Brad Stanton asks, Lance, do you have any favorite restaurant that you eat at while you're in Japan? Are you a Ribera guy?
No, okay, so Ribera is an attraction to me. I love going there because, you know, I have a little bit of a heat with old Ribera because they used to have my picture up on the wall and then they randomly just took it down for some reason. So I don't particularly like going there as much. I did get my jackets and I've gone a few times, you know, when a sponsor will take us and take care of everything and whatnot. But, you know, it's one of those things where I'm not a big fan of their steak and how it tastes necessarily. It's good, don't get me wrong, it's just not my thing. So the one like place that I love to go when I first go or when I get back is it's a place called Danger Steak. And the wrestler was Mr. Danger. He was a death match wrestler, and it's another small little joint. But the steak is it's fantastic. It's served in like little steak bits, and the sauces they have are amazing. And it's a really cool place, especially the taste of the steak.
Now, are you like a big sushi guy when you're over there too?
If I get taken out for it, or if I find a good conveyor belt, sushi spot, I definitely will go check it out. It's not something I'm always searching out. I love like the yakiniku, which is the Japanese form of Korean barbecue. And then I love like the shabu shabu, which is the hot pots. The dipping. It's the thinly sliced meats, and you dip it in the hot pots. I'm the one that gets everybody is I love horse meat, raw horse meat. So if and when I
Raw.
can find the good restaurant, and I have a good friend who takes me out over there usually when I am in Tokyo, and helps me find this good spot. And we go every time. I posted pictures on my Instagram and things like that of the delicious raw horse meat.
So I knew that horse meat was a thing. I did not know that raw horse meat was a thing. Wow.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing.
All right. Now, do they like wrap it in rice or anything, or just straight up horse meat?
No, it's usually served on a platter. It's usually served super fresh, super cold. And then it's either salted or sauced, and then you get like a dipping sauce, and then you can get rice or whatever you want with it. So,
All right. Well, Yambag Jones got your new nickname. Hashtag trending. Horse meat Jones.
or it should have just been Horse Meat Hawk.
Horse meat hawk. Now we've got to rename the show. It's going to be Horse Meat Mailbag. Next up,
It just keeps getting worse.
next up, we've got Phil, who asked one that we already covered recently on the Snake Pit, but we can touch on it again here, the Reader's Digest version. What's it been like having Jake as your manager in AEW? Great experience for you, right?
Yeah, it's been awesome. Like I said, we haven't done a lot lately together. I'm hoping that'll change more in the future. But he's been amazing because he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's had his down and dark times, and he's in probably one of the best times of his life. And he's always very informative, and if you have questions, he loves to answer them. He loves to help in any way you can. I said this before when we did the last one. I've kind of figured out in my way how to be the Murderhawk Monster in the ring. But the one thing that he helped me out the most when I was getting chances to speak was giving a voice to the Murderhawk Monster, which is essential in Western wrestling, American wrestling, TV wrestling. In Japan, we had the luxury of just kind of, it was all about the sport. It was all about the action. We did backstage interviews, but they were short and quick, and just yelled and screamed, and everybody's going to die, and then I disappeared, and it was vaguely translated for their YouTube channel or whatever. But like I said, in the States, it's more essential to speak. I'm not given a lot of chances to speak, but when I do get those chances, Jake has helped me out tremendously in giving that voice again to the Murderhawk Monster.
I always thought it was cool that it seemed like you and Jake were really kind of splitting time during the promos. Like Jake is known as a promo guy, but he's not there to get Jake over. He's there to help you get over. And
For
so
sure.
it's cool to see that there was a good split. Was that something that was planned by AEW, or was Jake saying, "Hey, I'll say this," and then you take it, or how would that go?
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of working at AEW is there's a lot of free range to do what you want, and Jake is Jake, and initially in the beginning it was more about Jake speaking and me showing out, and then like I said, when there were opportunities for me to speak, it was very much Jake going, all right, let's how do I'm gonna say this, and you can come in here, or you start with this, and then I'll come at the end. But it was very much a 50-50 to do me the favor to help me again learn how to speak and give the voice to the monster. And he is who he is, and he can say what he can say with such smooth, cunning ability. And it was trying to find that voice for myself. And if I didn't get the chance to speak, or if it wasn't a 50-50 situation, I wasn't going to grow, and he knew that. So it was very much Jake that was very much like, all right, cool, I want to say this, what do you want to say, or where do you come in, how much time do we have, so I'll talk for this long and you go for this long, da da da. So it was very much Jake trying to help me again find that voice.
We've got one from Darren, who asks, what's the worst injury you've ever suffered in the ring?
Well, the worst injury I think I've had, I've been amazingly blessed. I have a true faith in God. and he's protected me tremendously in my whole career. But the worst injury that I've had to deal with wasn't like one that just happened right in the moment. I've had like a partial tear of my tricep. I've, broken my hand, but then, continue to work around them and through them and things like that. But those, in my opinion, were minor because they weren't something that required like direct surgery. Probably should have gotten some surgery on my hand, but it is what it is. So it's kind of deformed now. But mine was, so I had a lower back surgery back in 2017, and it was something that was cumulative. It had I was dealing with a sciatic situation. I'd wrestled on it for about a year. I was in Japan. Suzuki Gun, the group that I was a part of with Minoru Suzuki, we'd been gone from New Japan for 2 years. We're actually just kind of on loan from New Japan to Pro Wrestling Noah. And we just made our return back to New Japan, and we were on the New Beginning tour, which is right at the end of January, beginning of February, and we'd done a show in Sapporo, which is the northern island. So we're flying back, and it was hurting pretty good. And I didn't, I dealt with that before, but I was like, all right, I don't, see, maybe it'll alleviate and it'll not hurt as bad in a little bit. But like every day after that, like we got back to Tokyo and it was hurting. The next day we had a show in Tokyo, and like I remember we had a 10-man elimination match, and at one point one of the guys tried to tag me into the match, and I just looked at him and went, nope, not going in right now. Can't do it. And he was, it was one of the Japanese boys, and I just said no, and he just kind of was like, okay, like there's no communication really. It was just like he didn't know what to do. So we continued on. We finished the match. I would have gone immediately to the back, but our team was winning that night, so I had to stay ringside. I did, but just long enough. And as soon as it was done, I was in the trainer's room, just getting acupuncture and everything they could do. It didn't really help. The next day, we had a couple days off or something like that. The next day, it was worse. And then finally, like the day we were supposed to be leaving Tokyo again, like I called the office and like, I need to go to the hospital. And to their credit, they took tremendous care of me. They went and got full MRIs done. And ultimately, I had a severe herniation at my L5S1, which is at the base of your back. And it was protruding so far that you couldn't see the nerve ending, according to the doctor. Did a little bit of everything, every kind of medication we could try. Nothing helped. And finally, surgery was agreed upon. And I had a lower back surgery on that L5S1 called a microdiscectomy, where they just basically shave off the herniation right at the point, and yeah, it was an interesting experience to say the least.
How long was the recovery for something like that?
Probably should have been longer than I took, because I didn't, I had the surgery in Japan. Once I got cleared to come home, I did, which was, a couple weeks after the fact. And then, like, I want to say I returned to New Japan, and I kind of told them, I was like, oh, no, I'm good to go. And this was right about 7 months. And we did an appearance at the G1 Climax final in Tokyo. And then, a week and a half, 2 weeks after that, we had our first tour back. And so that was roughly close to 7.5, maybe 8 months. Probably too quick, but luckily, nothing got worse, and it's been more or less good. I'll never be 100% in that scenario, but nothing that truly affects me.
Is there any, like, do you have to work around, like, you don't take any particular moves to avoid, further injuring that, or like how do you protect yourself moving forward?
Yeah, you don't you try not to take anything on your ass, to say the least. When I did my finish move, which is the blackout, pretty much my whole career when I was doing it, it was a sit down move. It was like a sit down power bomb. If you've seen it, like I said, it's over the head. The guy flips out in front of you. And like I said, for most of my career, when I was doing this move, it was a combination of him coming over, me sitting down. Don't do any leg drops anymore, things like that. I know Hogan's kind of told his story in the past that, he doesn't really regret anything in his career. He just wished he'd come up with a different finish move, because after, 25 years or whatever it was of dropping leg drops, night in, night out, it's caused him, I think he's had like 12 back surgeries. So, and it's just that compression move of landing on your ass and it just compressing every time. So I avoid that, like just on my back and things like that, everything hurts always. Like if anybody thinks that pro wrestling doesn't hurt, the physical aspect is very real. The falls are very real. and you're falling on a very hard surface every single time. There's ways to do it that we do it, and that's part of the magic act and the fun. But none of it is just like jumping on a pillow or in a pool or on your nice Tempur-Pedic bed. It's painful each and every time. I just don't do any ass bumps anymore.
I've got to share this story on here. And so I have started wrestling. And like I said, I'm training with International Wrestling Cartel. And the first time I took a bump, I noticed it kind of sent like a shockwave all the way through my entire body. And I was like, okay, I probably just took it weird. For the rest of that first training session, it hurt like that every time. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? I get on the phone with Jake and I said, hey, what's going on? Am I doing something wrong? Like, what do you think? He's like, throw yourself harder. I know it doesn't make any sense. He's like, but if you attack the mat, it doesn't hurt as much. I started doing it and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm fine. So it's just interesting, all like the tricks of the trade.
Yeah. Attacking the mat, attacking the ropes. I'm sure you had nice fun bruising from hitting the ropes. And a lot of it, we're timid and we start with it. And it's just a very unnatural thing to throw yourself onto the ground. And not like put your hands down, not put your elbows down, not try to protect yourself in essence, but just to do it in a way that, is conducive for pro wrestling, not really conducive for normal life.
Next up, we've got Michael Fasser, who asked thoughts on Vince Russo.
Vince and I, we were always cool when he was at TNA. My one fun story about Vince is, so at one point in my career in TNA, this was prior to the Rock and Rave infection, he decided to team me with Ron Truth Killings, the Truth. And, the reason behind that was we're literally walking backstage at the Impact Zone in Orlando, Florida. And, there's like a small passageway from one side to the other. And he's walking one way and I'm walking the other way. And he sees me and he's like, bro. I was like, what's up, Vince? He's like, bro, you can dance. And I went, yeah, I can dance. And I like backtrack in my life. I was the witch doctor at a club called the Voodoo Room in Austin, Texas. And my job on Saturdays, like I was a bouncer most of the week. And then on Saturdays, I like got painted up and dressed up and had my own stage. And I danced all night long. I was part of the entertainment. I was part of the show for this club. And, so yeah, anyway, some people had seen that me dancing because I guess we'd gone out as a group. And then, like I said, Vince in the hallway, bro, you can dance? I was like, yeah, I can dance. He's like, bro, you gotta dance. And so I randomly had, it was a pre-show match against Bobby Roode. And this is like, it was one of the pay-per-view first, like on the road pay-per-views that we did. And like, Bobby and I had this match. Bobby beats me. It was debuted that night that Tracy Brooks was his new manager because they'd been building up to who his new manager was going to be, and so he's beating me up after the match. She's slapping me. And then here comes Ron the Truth Killings, who comes and clears the ring and, gets Bobby out. Then he helps me up. And then after getting beat up, I decided to get up and start dancing with Ron the Truth Killings. There's a fun clip out there if people want to go see on YouTube, I think, and it was like the Ron Truth Killings TNA Christmas Bash or something like that, and like he's coming out doing his rap and he's dancing, he's throwing foam things. I think Petey Williams might have been out there with us. Like there's just me in the ring, my big ass with my Gin Coke jeans on and dancing my butt off.
All right, we got to find this clip.
Yeah, have fun looking for that one.
Play for the live crowd here next time around. All right, next up, Kev Guillotine, if that is your real name, has an interesting question. Could you have beat up Sid both in the ring and on the softball field?
In the ring, absolutely. Softball field, hell no.
It's like a softball pro, dude. No
way. I know.
You and Sid back in the day would have made a hell of a rivalry. Aside from Sting, all time, is there anybody you would have loved to have worked with?
I mean, with my history in Japan, like the Bruiser Brodies, Vader, Stan Hansen, guys like that, I think, if I'd had a chance in their heyday to work with them, I think my style would have worked well with them.
Man, can't go wrong with a guy like Bruiser Brody. And just imagining you two throwing down in Japan, holy smokes, that would be something. Peter asks, any fans ever try to test you outside of the ring?
Not yet. Not yet.
Feels like
I
it'd be
think,
dumb.
it's a fun experience, outside the ring and even inside the ring. I haven't had that test yet. And, I'd like to say that there's most men in this business I could whoop their ass, and there's a lot of men now that probably could whoop my ass. But the one thing that you're going to have to deal with is if I get to hit you one time, you're going to regret it, and that's what I always say. So I think it's that threat of maybe there are some guys that have actual badasses, have true traditional training, can go in there and whether it's MMA style, jiu-jitsu, or whatever, striking, kickboxing, all that stuff, they could probably whoop my ass in a real fight. But the threat of me actually punching them in the face exists, and therefore I don't. That's why nobody wants to test that. Because again, if I hit you, it's gonna hurt.
So nobody's tested you in the ring either. You've never had to throw a receipt.
No. I mean, I'm pretty sure people have gone off on me a little bit, but I'd like to believe I'm a tough son of a bitch, and I know when I've screwed up, and I can take what I got to take, and as long as you don't break anything, and I can use my arms and my leg, then if I feel like I deserve it, I'm okay with it.
Chris Newcomb has got one. What's the most hardcore thing you've ever done, and have you ever refused to do anything?
Most hardcore thing I've ever done, oh, man, I mean, I've had those Texas death matches. Those weren't like insane, like light bulbs and craziness like that. But for me, those were pretty hardcore and out there. There's only one time that I didn't straight up refuse to do it, but I was asked whether I wanted to do something or not. And this was early time in TNA. And like, it's one of those weird stories where my side of the story is, so basically I got called. I was asked if I would blade. And I said, is this a choice, or is this, something I'm being told to do? And they're like, no. We want you to be completely comfortable. If you're just not comfortable doing it, then, it's completely your choice, no hard feelings either way. And I said, well, if it truly is my choice, and I, at that point, had never actually done it before. And I was just like, then, if I'm being given a choice, then no, I would prefer not to do it. And I even expressed, I was like, but, if this is a make it or break it situation, if this is okay, if you say no, then, basically everything ends, then it's one of those things where I was like, I will do what I got to do, in the business. And at the time it was told to me, no, it's completely your choice. They just want to see, where your comfort level was. And if, you're not comfortable with it, we totally understand. Everything's cool. Okay, great. Moving forward, what I had originally been told was going to be a series of matches with Abyss at the time. And I show up for the match, which I thought was supposed to be the first of several in a feud. Ended up being a one and done. And, nobody ever expressed. They were like, no, everything's cool. It's just going a different direction with him, blah, blah, blah. And then sometime later, I don't remember how much later, I was having a discussion with Dutch Mantel, and he actually kind of expressed how that had happened. And I was, again, because one person says one thing, one person says another thing, like that I refused to do it. And I even told him at the time, I was like, it's like, I never refused to do anything. I was asked one way or another and told, it was totally up to me. And if I wasn't comfortable, everything was cool and there was no problem with it and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, that's not what was told to us. We didn't hear that. So like I said, it was a lost in translation moment from being asked and being given an option. And I said, I would prefer not to. And then later it kind of coming out supposedly that I just said, no, refused to do it. And that wasn't the case.
And Abyss at the time is a big time player in TNA. So for you to to get a program with him would have been awesome. It's like, they said like, it's your choice, but in reality, they wanted you to just say yes. And if you didn't, there's consequences.
Yep. And that happens a lot in the business of professional wrestling. That being said, the crazy part was the match that Abyss and I had, this is like 2005, Sacrifice, was probably one of my best matches that I'd had at TNA. And it's a match that when people ask me or have memories of my time in TNA is one of the ones that's brought up to me most often. And a lot of it was because just Abyss and I clicked. We had amazing chemistry. He was the monster he was, and the Hoyt Maniacs were alive and well at the time in TNA. And one of the coolest moments was back when I still could. I don't know. Maybe I still could. I just haven't tried in a long time. I did a springboard Van Terminator from one side of the ring to the other, into a chair, into his face. And wow. I would say that's one of my coolest memories there, because I stopped for 2 seconds and saw everybody in the impact zone stand up and like recognized it. And it was one of those like, all right, either I hit this and this is a great moment, or I don't, and I'm the joke of everything. And it came off without a hitch and nailed it. So it was pretty cool.
So now, could we see modern day Lance Archer give that a shot, or with the back situation, not so much?
No, the back doesn't limit me on that. I think it's just time. The last time I've done a springboard probably was, oh gosh, I can't even tell you the last time I did an actual springboard.
That would be a hell of a sight, a man your size doing that. I gotta go find this clip.
It's there.
Matt T's got one. He says, "Did your long red and white braids ever get caught in something during a match that caused an issue?"
No, not yet. Luckily, they've never. I think I used to run the really long single braid, and I think maybe one time it kind of wrapped around the rope and gave me a little bit of a tug, but it quickly, because it was just the very end, it quickly came unraveled, and there was no problem.
Now, you're in the ring with a bunch of dudes who are snatching you up from time to time. Anybody ever grab one of those, pull one out, or rip it, or anything like that?
Not pull one out, but it's definitely been used as a weapon a few times. Cody in our match at Double Nothing 2020 used it to try to choke me out with it a few times. So that's happened over the careers, especially when it was that long. It was very easy to use in that sense.
We've got Nate up next. We'll do a couple more before we get out of here. So just a reminder, guys, go ahead and hit us in the super chat if you want to guarantee that your question gets hit before we wrap this one up for the day. Nate is up next. Did you spend much time around Triple H in WWE?
I mean, we were there and we worked together, but he was still full-time active, and I was just the new kid coming up. So not a lot of time. My interactions with him were always easy and cool, but I wasn't a threat to him at any sense. So, it wasn't like he had any reason to do anything negative towards me or necessarily positive towards me. I started on their ECW product before it shut down and the original NXT started. So, I was just trying to learn my way in the company at the time. So I never had many interactions with him specifically, because that was the time when he was still really active. Sean, I was there for Sean's last match, at WrestleMania. Taker was still very involved. So, Batista was still there when I was there. So these guys were all still there and pretty active in the company. So they were on the top echelon. I was not. So it wasn't ever a situation where I had many interactions with them.
We've got a super chat from Mailbag Jones, and he asks, "What's stopping the Murderhawk from becoming the AEW champion?"
Brother, you're asking the wrong person on that question.
Yeah, I'm sure it's opportunity, and that's all it's going to take. Yep. Now, Fitz is up next. What's your craziest road story?
Oh man, I don't really have like crazy. Like I don't have like the oh my God, we went to jail, nobody found out, nothing crazy like that. I mean, my stories are fun. Like Japan, one of the funnier stories. So Suzuki is, if you know who Minoru Suzuki is, he's a legit badass. He's somebody who had his time fighting, and then he got into pro wrestling, and he's translated to pro wrestling, almost seamlessly, and especially in Japan because there's such a different respect for the fighters and the ones who become pro wrestlers in comparison. So we are out. This is my fun story that I tell guys. I don't remember where we were in Japan, but we were out, and so he'd taken us with one of his friends, or what we call sponsors. And sponsors are just guys that they have the money and they like to hang out with wrestlers, and they'll take you out to eat, and they'll take you out to clubs, and they'll do all the fun stuff. And it's, it's all on their dime, and it's just to hang out. So we were out with one of his friends, and it was all of us. It was pretty much all of Suzuki Goon. So it's like Suzuki, Taka Michinoku, Desperado, Taichi, myself, Shelton Benjamin, Davey Boy Smith Jr., and we're all out. We go eat, and then we go to a karaoke bar. And a lot of the karaoke bars in Japan are more like not private, but they're just, you can have a private room, or they're really small and they'll have like one bar and one seating area, and you're just all there. So again, it's all Suzuki Goon. So you got, like I said, you got to set up the scene. It's Suzuki and his friend had invited like a local comedian. And this local comedian didn't know who Suzuki was. You know, I mean, he didn't know the lore of Suzuki. He didn't know how badass of a dude he was. And Suzuki, to his credit, you know, is always, especially when we're not inside the ring, he was always very down to earth. He's very cool, he's very like fatherly to children. If we were around children and stuff, like you wouldn't expect him to be this way, but he was. But anyway, so it's like Suzuki, it's his friend, the comedian friend of his friend, Taka, Taichi, Desperado, they're all kind of sitting next together. Me and Shelton are sitting next together, and then Harry's down there on the other end with us. And if you don't, hostess girls they work at clubs. They are not exotic dancers, but they work in a club. And most of the time, if you go to a hostess bar, you know, they're dressed really nice and they sit with you and they'll make your drinks and then they'll light your cigarettes if you smoke, or they'll follow you to the bathroom and hand you a hot towel when you come out. And obviously, if you can have conversation with them, you know, you can talk to them and stuff like that. So the sponsor had brought a few of the hostess girls, and they were just literally hanging out with us at the strip club, or excuse me, not the strip club, the karaoke bar. And, you know, we're all in there and we're doing our thing, and Suzuki and them are on that one end, and Taich and Taka and Despy are sitting in the middle. And then me and Shelton, we're singing like Pour Some Sugar on Me or something, like bad 80s hair rock band songs, and like horribly singing it. And Davey Boy Smith is sitting on the next to me, and he's had a few drinks, and he's sitting with one of the girls, and, you know, she doesn't speak any English. So she's just sitting there because she's been told and paid to hang out and sit there. Like he's kind of like, he's getting a little flirty with her, and you can see that in her face, she's just fearing for her life because there's this 6'5" massive human being sitting next to her. He's not doing anything inappropriate. He's just being very cuddly with her, and she's just like in fear. And we always called Harry Kuma, which Kuma means bear. So he's got his arm around her, and he'll like pet her face or something like that. So we were always saying he's doing the bear paw, you know. And again, not doing anything super inappropriate, you know. I mean, I don't want anybody to take it like he was doing something super inappropriate. He wasn't at all. Like, he wasn't violating her in any way. She just this giant Canadian American gaijin foreign guy was sitting with her and trying to have a good time. She couldn't talk to him. So anyway, Sheldon and I are singing our butts off, and Harry's in full Kuma mood, and you got Kuma mode, and you got Taich and Taka and them sitting over there, and all this stuff is happening at one time, and like Suzuki sitting over there with his friend, and so I'm trying to put this together. So the guy, Suzuki's friend, tells his friend, the comedian guy, that, you know, he should just basically be very forceful with Suzuki. And Suzuki's like looking at him like side-eyed, and you know, so his friend's like, grab Suzuki's shirt. So the guy grabs Suzuki's shirt, and Suzuki's really looking at him side-eyed, and then you know, he points at him, and like Shelton tells the story, and he said he hears him say release, like in English, not even in Japanese. And it's Japanese men talking to Japanese men, and not even in Japanese. He just says in English, he's like, release. The guy doesn't release, and his friend's like, he say, yeah, do it more, do it, grab him harder. So he's grabbing his shirt, he's pulling on his shirt. Suzuki's like, release. And then all of a sudden you just hear, whap! Suzuki cold cocked this dude, and then followed him across the karaoke bar, just bap, 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 just smacking the crap out of him. And then he comes back and he sits down, and he looks over at us, and he picks up a drink, and he takes a sip, and he lets him eat, and he just giggles like a little kid. The Japanese man who just got smacked around by Suzuki comes over, and like he's on his knees and he's bowing and he's apologizing, you know, very Japanese culture way. And like all this is happening at once. We're singing, they're talking, Harry's Kuma, Suzuki's doing this, and like just all of a sudden, just all in the mix of all this stuff happening. And that's what makes it crazy. Is like there's bad karaoke going on, and these guys laughing and whatever, and da 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 da. Bah, 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 bah. It was just pretty crazy. So, I mean, that's probably one of my more interesting moments in my time in Japan. I've got a few of them, but that one was just nuts.
Man, so a little something for everybody there that night. You got some romance, some violence, music. Holy smokes!
Yes.
Well, Look, we're not going to beat that story, guys. That's going to wrap us up for this edition of the Murderhawk Mailbag. I want to thank everybody who came on to join us. And remind you guys that you got to get to OneTrueSportTV.com. If you're not a member, please do become a member. We're going to have a lot more interactive experiences and opportunities to chat with folks like Lance. And Lance, brother, I appreciate your time as always. Looking forward to another one down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man.
All right, everybody, take care.